Hey everybody, welcome to Unscripted. We're all about inspiring better conversations and helping people think more deeply and critically about faith, life, and leadership. I am so excited today because I have my good friend here with me. His name is Brian Episcopo, and he is going to become the future lead pastor, or is it senior pastor, lead pastor?
Lead pastor.
Lead pastor of Appleton Alliance Church. He is a father, a husband, and he's also an aspiring jiu-jitsu or the Brazilian jiu-jitsu master. Yeah. He's going to be awesome, right?
I'm only 10 years from a black belt.
10 years from a black belt. Yeah. Awesome. I wanted to throw the Brazilian jiu-jitsu thing in there for you.
Yeah.
Brian, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. I heard you wrestle through just what rank I am as a friend of yours.
Yeah.
And I think if I crack the top 5, I'll be happy.
Oh gosh.
My mother-in-law still reminds me that I was in her top 5, but that's all I know. So I don't know how high. Yeah.
Okay.
My mother-in-law she's like, when I was looking at the students, because my wife and I met in college.
Okay.
And she's like, you were in the top 5.
Wow. So there's only like 4 other guys that could have married
your wife.
She doesn't,
to this day, she won't tell me what out of the top 5, what rank I officially held.
Yeah.
But all right. So with you, I'm good with that. That goes on my fridge.
You got it, man. I'll get you a little card later and we can send it with you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to have you here. But before we dive into some of the heavier stuff, I just want to give you a chance to introduce yourself. I want to hear about you and your family. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm married. Her name is Hannah. And again, I was in her mother-in-law's top 5. That's an important detail. Or in her mom's top 5, I should say. We've married for going to be 11 years this year. And
same here, right there with you.
Yeah, we are. It's been great. We have 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And they're not paying rent yet, but we're keeping them. We're letting them stay. They're still
4 and 2 are great ages.
Yeah, they're doing great. They're doing okay.
They're doing okay.
They're a solid B-. No, I'm just kidding. We love them. Addie is the oldest. She's 4, and then Elias is 2. Let's see what else. I'm in ministry full time, obviously, and I've been doing that it'll be 10 years this August.
Okay.
So I got my decade in.
Yeah.
So I think I'm figuring it out.
Nice.
Yeah. I think I've almost got it figured out.
Only like 30 more years,
right?
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. So I worked in private equity, a defense contractor in town here for 3 years prior to starting in pastoral ministry. So that was 2008 to 2011.
Okay.
And then
tell me a little bit about Appleton Alliance and how you got there and a little bit of that.
Boy, I grew up in the church. My dad was and still is currently the senior pastor at Appleton Alliance Church, and loved it, man. I grew up really blessed to have great church experiences. I'm under no delusion that a lot of kids that grow up with parents in ministry, it's a hard journey. You can move around a lot. Usually exits from ministry aren't always the most smooth or amicable. Kids see that, and so it can get blurry between like their view of God and their view of their dad's job and their view of their family's livelihood, and that gets crisscrossed. I didn't have any of that. My dad was really blessed to lead wonderful, healthy congregations. He led 3 congregations, Appleton being the last one of those 3. And I loved it. So growing up, I always knew I wanted to be involved in the local church and in ministry. It was one of my favorite parts of my childhood and young adult teenage years. I just didn't necessarily want to be called to be a pastor. Part of it was I didn't want to even be tempted to compare myself with my dad or even have other people do that. That had always kind of been a part of being in the fishbowl of a community leader's son, or children. As a pastor, you're kind of a community leader. It doesn't matter what size congregation, you're a community leader, and your kids get in that fishbowl. People know your dad, they know your family, and so you can feel the weight of that. And so as a kid, my reaction was to just not do anything related to that world vocationally. I loved to be involved, but I was going to chart my own course, be my own man kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, that's not really a good reason. That it's not a good calling to run away from something. A calling is when you're running towards something, right?
Yeah.
And I spent my, formative years searching for a call, really just running away from being a pastor. I was like anything but being a pastor.
Yeah.
And so, I had a lot of other interests. Being a pastor, you use a lot of gifts, so you have other interests. But I didn't really want to be called into pastoral ministry full time. I just would rather be involved in the church and enjoy it from the pew.
Well, I want to stop you right there for a second, because I know a little bit of your story, and I think this is a good jumping off point for a moment, for a little sidebar. And then I want to get into the next season and the current season in just a little bit. The sidebar is this: you say you have other interests.
Yeah.
And one of those interests is, I think you told me, is comedy.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, like, I don't know any of the details, but you're into comedy,
Yes.
and like, what have you done in it? Like, tell me a little bit about what that was like.
You know, I loved making people laugh. A little bit of like every comedian, they always kind of joke about is like on the inside crying and depressed. And part of that is because comedy is always tragedy. There's nothing funny about like, I went to the mall and I had a great day and it was awesome. No, it's like, no, I went to the mall and I got hit by a bus, but it was hilarious because of this. Like, it's always tragedy. Comedy is always bad things happening, and they're funny. And so there's a little bit of that in every comedian, but my comedy started because I was bullied a lot as a middle schooler, and I found that when I could make people laugh, they accepted me. Now I've had to work through all that. There's a whole bunch of stuff there, and it's hard.
Let's dig deep into that.
Yeah, right. But it's all good, I think. Right, but I loved making people laugh. It was a joy. It wasn't just a coping. It was also something I was like, oh, I love doing this. This is fun. It's fun to be able to like do something and say something that send people into an uncontrollable reaction. I mean, laughing, you can't control it.
That's so interesting.
Your body reacts. I mean, think about it. Your breath, your voice. I love being able to say things that move people that way. That's part of even my love of being a pastor, is God uses you to move people in a profound way. Laughter is one way, but also obviously altering their values and their hearts, aligning them with Christ.
Yeah. So you've done some stand-up
But
before.
I've done stand-up. I've done comedy. I loved it. I was fantastic. I was phenomenal I was so far above average in being mediocre.
Okay.
Like, it was remarkable. It was head spinning how average I was at comedy. And,
Okay.
and that is a very specific niche, because what you can do then is set up the headliner.
Sure.
So your job is to go in and get people to laugh enough, but not too much. So the golf claps, the chuckles. I was a prodigy at getting out average, mediocre jokes.
I'm so curious about this. So there's two things I want to ask you about. The first is this. What does that taught you about speaking? Because like you probably read a room differently. You think about things in a different way. How does that? I mean, you speak to a number of people, thousands of people, right? And so when you do that, how has that shaped your presence in a room?
Yeah, timing. You know, as a rhetorician,
totally.
You studied rhetoric. There's eloquence. There's a timing to things. And communicating is really about connecting. If you've read any of the How to Talk Like TED, the TED Talk stuff, they talk about this, that what's happening when you're speaking is you're actually bringing everybody together in unison. Everybody is thinking what you're saying. They're thinking about what you're talking about. You're bringing an idea together. And for a moment in time, a room full of total strangers are united into one thought, an idea, as they're listening to you. And the more you can captivate and bring them into focus, you can bring them together. So you're bringing people together. You're also using, timing, pace, and volume, and all the levers of articulating an idea that bring people together and help them grab onto something. So I just have enjoyed studying the craft of how do you use all those levers, not just to get people to laugh, but to get people to align and unite around good things.
Yeah.
And we would, as Christians, say the best things are even the things of God. So how do we do that?
Sweet. I think that's really neat. I mean, I can see how it relates to comedy specifically, because when you're trying to get them to hit the punchline, you have to have everybody tracking with you. Yeah. And it's similar in giving a sermon or giving a speech. If you have people tracking with you, and then you hit the punchline, maybe it's not funny, but it's the line that gets you. Yeah. That's really a uniting factor.
It is. You also, to do it well, you have to be believable. It has to be in your gut. You'll never hear a comedian say, 3 years ago I was in a store and this guy came up to me. It's always, no, last week I was in, and whether it was or not, it doesn't matter. We don't care, but it feels authentic when you say, last week I was in the store. Just the other day I was in the store, and last night. Now that's a little deceitful way to do that, to create that authenticity. But what I'm trying to say is when you're teaching, you have to be believable. That's authentic to who you are. And that's not something you want to manufacture with necessarily theatrics or theater, but you do have to communicate that this isn't just as preachers, we're not just presenting research. This is in our guts. This has altered our marriages, our families, our lives. And I need to communicate that to you. And so I'm going to bring my emotions to bear on that. It's not inauthentic to think about my emotional place that I'm going to be in when I get to that point in my sermon or when I get to that point in my message. That's not theater. That's you trying to convey an idea, utilizing all the things God's put in you. It's making what you're saying and the teaching, the Christian word for that or theological is incarnate. It's in your flesh. It's coming out of you, but it's also because it's in you. You've gone under that surgical knife that you're asking everybody else to go underneath, and so that. If you want to connect with your audience, they have to feel that and know that, and you've got to be able to communicate that. And you have to use every attribute of your humanity, including your emotions, including your timing, including your voice and your passion and your heart to do that.
Yeah.
If an idea is sad, you ought to not again for the sake of theater, but to help them understand it, you need to go to those places in your heart where you're sad and communicate those things from that place, because that is true of you, and you need to think about the grief of that topic or that point in your message and whatever you're saying. And so there's a poetry to that. There's so much nuance and complexity to that, but it's important, and I think that comedy can help.
Yeah.
Refine those muscles.
In rhetoric, we call it narrative fidelity. So
Yeah.
it's like it rings true to you. It's something that makes sense. And I think that the best acting, the best speeches, they're always coming from a place of honesty. And you have to find that spot inside of you, because you can't fake it for too long. You can fake it for a while, but not for too long. Eventually, you have to go to a place where that actually is real to you, because I think all of us are human, and humans have been able to sense in other people whether they're being honest or not, or authentic or not, and sniff it out. Like that's a thing that is just in us. God put that in us, and I think that's crazy.
Comedy also is. I've learned a couple things that don't exactly directly. I don't directly port them over and use them, but there are principles there. So in comedy, what you'll learn is in the first 5 minutes you need 3 claps.
3 claps.
Three claps is the goal, because there's a subtle psychology that's going on when you clap. Whether or not you like the person or you even like what's happening, it'll move the needle. It'll build your affections.
Yeah.
So like a comedian will start out and say, clap if you've been to Disney World, if he's going to tell a joke about Disney World, and people just clap, just because he said so. But what they're doing is they're trying to manufacture a connection. It would be like, and not that they're trying to make everybody think that this is great, but they're like, I want you to lean in. I want us to connect. I need your affirmation to do that of this moment and this idea. And so he'll be like, clap if you've been to Disney World, or clap if you've been married for more than 10 years, and then he'll go into his joke. But it's the idea is to get that psychology happening. And so I've tried to do that with laughter, or with not so much applause, but some other kind of way to kind of get engagement from the audience early on, and build those connections. One of the things that you'll hear me do a lot in my teaching is I'll look for a way to tell a self-deprecating story.
Best humor is self-deprecating.
It's not only self-deprecating, but it also levels the playing field. When you're on a platform and everybody else is sitting and looking at you, the psychology underneath that is this guy thinks he's better than me, or he is better than me, or he's above me. And we know as preachers, and we know as pastors, we're just one of the body of Christ. We happen to be the little pinky finger or whatever ligament in the body that we do what we do, but we need each other as a team. We're not better than anybody else. Yeah. We're not somehow, we're not the pastor because we're the godliest guy in the room, or we're the smartest guy in the room. We're just playing a role. We just said yes to a call, and that's it. And so we have to, as preachers, continually remind people, as Christians, that with the playing field is level. We're all human, and as in the Christians, we call that the priesthood of all believers. We're all priests. We have access to God through Christ in a way that give us the spiritual authority and leadership to do whatever it is God's called us to do in equal measure, right? And so one of the ways that I'm trying to do that up front is a self-deprecating story. Yeah. And comedians will tell you can't make fun of anybody else or anything until you've made fun of yourself.
That's the first step.
So you have to, your first jokes have got to be about how much you're an idiot. And then you can tell everybody else they're idiots and they'll laugh and be fine with it,
Yeah, but that's because they know you're an idiot too.
Yeah,
so it's all good.
I can't be the hero of all my own sermon illustrations. I can't be the hero of all my own applications, I gotta somehow remind people and work against the innate psychology that's happening that moment, which is he's more godly than me. He's holier than me. He's better than me. And we know we're not. And it's important that people understand that. And that's one way to do that.
I think that's great. That gets us into some of the other stuff I want to get to in a little bit. But first, I want to ask one more specific thing about comedy, and that's this. You kind of peeled away some of the pieces of the onion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where when we're talking about what comedy teaches about humans, like what about us as people. So you've learned some maybe just ways of connecting with people, and that's awesome, and it's super helpful. I'm curious what you've learned through comedy about like human nature.
Yeah.
Like people are people, right?
Yeah.
And they'll laugh at self-deprecating stories. And then when you're an idiot, they can think that they're an idiot too a little while, or whatever the word is. But I'm curious, what do you think?
Yeah.
That's a hard question.
That's a good question. Well, I think one of the things that come to mind is, anyone in the entertainment industry, if you're listening to this and you're in a ministry, or we use the term as Christians ministry, but if you're in a job or a vocation where you're in entertainment, you have a powerful impact on people, because you might give them the only dose of peace. You might be giving them the only dose of laughter in their day. You might be giving them the only dose of even just transcendent inspiration through your music and through your art, whatever it is you do. And you're tapping into something that's inside of everybody. I don't think it's an evolutionary construct, and that is that we are meant for something beyond. We're meant for something that transcends. And I think, in Ecclesiastes, I think it's 3:11, I think. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a pastor or anything, so. But I think it's in Ecclesiastes. I think it's 3. It's Solomon writes, God has set eternity in the hearts of men, but they can't fathom it. So you have that tension, right, where I know I'm meant for more in life than earning a bunch of money and buying nice, shiny things and then dying with as much as I possibly can. I think all of us know that that's not, well, even the staunchest atheist listening right now, I think if you're really honest with yourself, you know it. And if anything else, if you're like, no, I still think that's all there is, and that's it. And that, this idea of divine and divinity is an evolutionary construct to keep our species going. Fine. Why do you cry at funerals? The reason we all cry at funerals is because something in us knows this wasn't how it's supposed to be. Eternity is set in the heart of all of us, and we know it, and that's why we grieve at funerals. It's not just because we spend a lot of time with that person. It's because we love them. There's a transcendence. So your art, whether it be a comedy, which is an art, some have debated if it's the highest art. I go with them because it requires the unification of tragedy, but other things. So, but tragedy, visual art, graphic art, photography, music, video, all of those things invoke a transcendence, and I think in the human nature that I think is powerful and visible.
I think that's beautiful. That was not the answer I expected. It was much better. So I love it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I would love to know the answer you expected. Those are way more fun. Okay. Part 2.
I think I was going more towards like the depravity of human beings.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I got plenty of that.
But anyways, okay, we actually have a mutual friend.
Yeah.
That mutual friend happens to be my cousin.
Yeah.
Her name is Brooke, and I love her.
Brooke,
She's
we love
great.
you. Please watch this. We love
She
you.
will. She does. She comments back
She's
and forth
the
once in a
best.
while. I know. She has a baby, a brand new baby. It's awesome. But anyways, I reached out to her. And I was like, what should I ask him about? And she gave me this piece of advice, and she's gonna hate me for telling you that she told me. But
as long as she loves me.
She asked me. She said that you've had to deal with a lot of change over the course of your years at Appleton Alliance. You guys are a church that is always growing and pushing the envelope, trying to do different things, and like I feel like that's similar in the way that we always do crazy different things. Yeah. And so I love that. But I'm curious, how have you learned? Like, what have you learned about leading through change? Yeah. What mistakes have you made? What things have been good?
Yeah, boy, leading change. You have to know what doesn't change inside of you as a leader. What are those convictions that drive down deep in you? What are those things that will anchor you in the middle of uncertainty? All right, the change is always is the only constant. The world there's a lot of change. And at the same time, there's this paradox of there's nothing new under the sun, as the Bible puts it. But in that, humans are still humans. We're one thing that COVID's taught us. It's like, we have to separate and be apart, but inevitably we're just going to come back together because we just love each other. Yeah. And that's human. It's something's never changed.
And maybe not even love each other, but we need each other.
We need each other. Yeah. So it's like, the whole new normal thing. It's like, well, then eventually we're going to start hugging again because we just love each other or we need each other. So I think there is a transcendence. You need to know what those things are, those convictions, because in the winds of change, you're going to need to know where you're headed, what your North Stars are. But I think, one thing, I'm stealing this from John Cotter and his books on change, that I've realized is you need to be what you want to see first before you put it on the wall and institutionalize it. So even as I'm walking into this next chapter of ministry, there's a lot of things I love to mount on the wall as our new institutional values, our vision, where we're going, our mission. But what often happens is you start there and think, because I printed it off on this nice glossy paper and put it on the wall, that now we're going to do this and be this differently. And visuals help, but it's actually the opposite. It's like, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just organize around it? Why don't you structure around those changes you want to make? And then once they're happening and you've been able to share the stories of their success and their story of it being successful, then mount it on the wall and put it up. And in little ways, I'm doing this right now. I'm really don't want to waste my prep time, because there is going to be a change coming where I'm going to be the senior pastor in February of 2022. But it's almost more important now that I do and be the things I want to see during that time. And begin to implement those in my life personally and in my team, and before we, try to rain them down from the mountain. Yeah. We need to be them. We need to just do them first, and then let's put on the wall who we are versus put on the wall who we're not and who we hope to be.
Yeah, we actually had a process of 8-9 years ago. This church is about 19 years old, and we had a certain set of values that we had for those first 10 years, and then about 8-9 years ago, there was a meeting where we said, okay, those were our values. Yeah. But now, as we've been a church for this long, because you kind of got to start with something, right?
Yeah, you have to start with something, 100%.
And so once we've had that for a certain amount of time, we kind of looked at our church again and said, well, actually, by what we do, what is it that we value? And so we kind of came up with this whole brand new set of values.
Yeah, that's super smart.
And it was great. It was just fun to even just read through them on and off again.
And they feel more true to who you are, because you've been living them out.
Yeah. It's more honest. It has more narrative fidelity.
Yeah,
it's good.
That's a little bit of a nuanced answer, I think. But this is another thought that comes to mind just recently, thinking about change. I can tell a young leader that spends a lot of time with old people. They don't get riled up about stuff. There's just a steady eddiness to them. I can tell young leaders that spend no time with old people. And I've just, this, if you've done any kind of work in psychology, children that are oftentimes leaders in their tribes and communities, and that have incredible resilience, have unique amount of access to their grandparents. Wow. And I think the same is true of us spiritually. We need spiritual parents. We need spiritual older siblings. Those are important roles. But we need spiritual grandparents. And when it comes to leading change and being able to shoulder that's a heavy lifting amount of work, and managing the process and not going too quick, having the governor just right on the not too slow, not too fast. So much of that for me has been grandparents, spiritual grandparents speaking into my decisions, my where I'm going. And I've been a beneficiary of
that's really neat.
Of that. So I would encourage a young leader, any leader that is leading change, bring some real, because we think change is innovation, it's next gen. I kind of make this joke. Remember when we were in our 20s and people cared about what our ideas were?
Yeah,
it's
like stop now.
But no one cares anymore. So, but I think so often we think about change, we think about new, young, and whatever. I find it, I can tell a leader, man, when they got old people around them that encourage them, that love them, and the kind of profile of spiritual grandparent you're looking for is a grandparent, right? Someone who doesn't care how you perform. They just love you. They just
No
want to
matter
show
what.
up to your soccer game. They don't care who wins. They just love seeing their grandbabies play soccer or do whatever. That's really hard to find. There's a lot of grandparents that want to, tell you what they think and how they should do it, and that's not unimportant in feedback. And it's important to have people in your circle who will give you critical feedback like that. But a spiritual grandparent is like someone who's just like, man, Sam, I love you. They believe in you more than you believe in yourself. Like
Totally.
when you question yourself, they're like, oh no, Sam's he's a good kid. He's gonna be amazing. My grandkid is just amazing. And, you want, and that you want to be around people that spoil you with that kind of stuff, because we're gonna go through such hard stuff, leading change. We need spiritual grandparents.
That's really good advice. That's really good. It makes me laugh because on Monday night we have baseball, Monday and Thursday nights, and for our two little guys, and this is their first year, and they're brand new at it. But both sets of grandparents come out and watch the whole thing, and it's awesome. It's such a beautiful thing.
I know. Well, the parents are like, hey, you gotta be more aggressive on the field, or you gotta swing through it more. You kind of want them to get. Grandparents are just like, he's amazing. They're the best ever. And so I think if you're trying to lead change, which is often innovation and new, right, untested, uncharted waters, surround yourself with some old people, like grandparents, because I just think if you really, again, look at the psychology. If you want to really empower young leaders, if you really want to have a church that's new and innovative and really doing some great change, you better have some older people around the table. Yeah. It's really kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
But it's true. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've kind of like hashed on it a little bit, or kind of gotten close to it a little bit. You have a big change happening soon. And it's been fun because we have a similar thing that's happening. In January, I take over as lead pastor here at Ripon Community Church. And in February, and you've gone through like a nice, long, like multiple year process of this happening. So like you're all
nice was generous. I would just say long. How's that?
But I want to get into that a little bit. So a couple of things on the table with it. One is your dad is currently the pastor, the lead and senior pastor. Let's just talk about that for a second. How is that?
My dad, it's easier for both me and my dad to have just gone our separate ways, for both of us. I mean, I just look now, I think about it. My dad, the spiritual fortitude and the confidence in Christ he had to hold on to in even initiating the decision and the process of bringing me in-house to work on his staff. My dad and I are under no delusion, the optics of that, and we both feel that. I probably feel it more than him, if I'm honest with you. I do worship at the idol of my own PR and being understood. I don't mind if you disagree with me, just heaven forbid you misunderstand me. I want to be understood. And I have to make peace with the fact that Jesus was misunderstood. He did things people disagreed with or didn't even understand. And if I'm following him, that's going to be true of me as a leader. And that's hard for me because I'm a people pleaser. I want to be worshipped, and I want people to love me and worship me and be pleased with everything I do and not be confused. And my dad has less of that, but it still stings when people look at you and they question your heart, they question your character, your motives. And so even for my dad bringing me in and me, it's hard to. There's benefits. I don't want to be naive and say there's not benefits to being able to pick up the phone, call my dad any day of the week and ask him questions about ministry and things I need fixed or things I need dealt with. That's a huge blessing. I couldn't do that with another senior pastor, But there are some real challenges that make you want to take your kickball and go somewhere else and just be my own person. And but we both, by God's grace, He held us tight and fast. And we have such a there's two things that are hard to describe how viscerally we feel them. We both have such a ridiculous respect for each other as leaders. Like I, with only fear and trembling, will ever disagree with my dad, but I do all the time, right? But I just so respect it. Like I am under no delusion that all of this stuff happened in our church in spite of him and me saving his ministry or us as a staff. No, God used him in a profound way. And we are just so beneficiaries of that. So I have such deep respect for him and his leadership and his acumen and his ability and his anointing there. But I also have such a rich friendship. I mean, I hate it when we have maybe a contentious day of disagreement, because I so enjoy hanging out with him. I mean, he's my bud. Like, where am I going to go to hang out and watch the game? My dad's place.
Yeah.
So if we're in a stinking fight, it's kind of a bummer, because we both just want to hang out with each other. And that actually has worked as a great backstop, because we'll disagree, we'll get into it, we'll be a little upset, but at the end of the day, it's like, well, shoot, I want to go to our house for a cookout and watch the game. I don't want to be ticked at my dad. So we got to figure this out. And so that helps, along with the incredible respect that, you know, if we disagree, it's not without a very good reason and a very depth of experience and anointing that we just respect. So those things have made it a lot easier to stick around and do this stuff.
Yeah.
I've crossed some boundaries. I mean, my staff will tell you, our team will tell you, there have been moments where I forget to wear the employee hat and I'm the son hat. And when you're son, you can get away with just, no, Dad, you're wrong. That's not the way we should do it. And I'll take him on in meetings sometimes, and I've had to do it. And if he's watching this, he'll tell you, I had to go back and I'll say, Dad, shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. You're the senior pastor. You're the leader. And I took you on publicly, and that wasn't right. And I was too casual about it, cavalier, because I'm just your son, and I know you're not gonna fire your son or whatever. And
yeah.
you know, I can talk to you like that because you're my dad, and you know, and that. But the thing is, when people observe that, they don't know they don't know what's going on. They don't know how good we have a relationship, so it can make them nervous. And my dad actually facilitated kind of a bit of an intervention with this on me.
Yeah.
He had a consultant. He had speak into my life about this, and he was there, and I just had to hear some hard feedback. But and not to say I was bad at 1,000 afterward, but that's if you want to know kind of the inside scoop of some of the challenges. That was when I had to grow in, and that was hard. I think if he was honest, he stepped into it too. There were some times where, you know, he could, you know, when I came in and pitched him an idea, he could tell me that's a stupid idea, and you know, what idiot would think that? You know, he wouldn't say that to another employee because I'm his son. You know, it was easier, and so, you know, we both kind of did that to each other at different times, but we found a way through it. And
yeah, what I think is super interesting about that is in one hand there's a cavalierness to it, and maybe doesn't seem like you're taking things as seriously. Yeah. But in the same sense, there's so much at stake for you in keeping that relationship healthy, that it's almost got more gravity to it. And I think that's really powerful. One of the things I want to say out loud, because I know I think about this. Like, I'm not Mike. I'm not the lead pastor here. And when I assume that role, there's going to be differences. You're not your dad. You've already alluded to the fact that you disagree about things at times. How do you think about that in terms of the DNA of Appleton Alliance Church and going forward? What are the thoughts?
Great question. So you'll have to preach this to yourself, and occasionally you'll have to share this with the people that are struggling with your difference in leadership. Is we have to be really careful to distinguish between right and wrong and just different. And that's really hard for people when they see the fruit and the success of a certain approach to problem solving and leadership and structure and culture and priorities in the budget. They see the fruit of all of those years of doing it. They are the fruit of those things. And then we're going to change those things. We've got to tell ourselves and be okay and be confident in Christ and confident in the reality of how he's made us. And we've maybe even got to coach at least our leaders to say, guys, I'm going to do some stuff. It's going to be different, but I want you to be really careful about using the word wrong and right. It just is different. Even me, like, dude, I've had to come to grips with how many times I've looked at boomer style leadership and, you know, boomer style team. You know, so like my dad's team, he's very open about the fact that, like, he's friendly with everybody, but like they don't have to be buds. Like, you know, we're a coalition of leaders that get together, solve problems, and leave. But we're not gonna all hang out with each other and do stuff. And, you know, as millennials, we're like, well, it'd be cool to like have an inner circle that like we are doing life together. You know, we have relationships. Like, we're living life. We're brothers and sisters. We're not just staff and employees. And I would look at the boomers and be like, that's not New Testament, you know, like that's
totally,
you know, like that's wrong. But now I go, whoa, hang on a second.
There's some goodness to that.
Yeah. And you know what? Like we do some violence to people's theology when we tell them like, we're a family, and then we fire them because like you don't fire family, so that messes people up. So like there's actually some stuff that's good about those things. And so we just have to be careful about looking at different styles of leadership and labeling them right or wrong. I'm becoming, the closer I get to that chair, you probably feeling this too, we realize how much respect we got for people like Mike and my dad, how much they were keeping back from us, that we had no realization that they were holding back from us, and how what they were doing wasn't necessarily wrong. Even the things we put on our list, they were like, oh, I'm going to change that right away because that's wrong. Now it's like, okay, I'm still going to, well, and it's like, I'm still going to change it, but it's not wrong. It's not because it was ever wrong even.
You're absolutely
so
right.
that's a key thing. The other thing that I've had to say is listen, me and my dad right now are like here on alignment, very close, very, very tight in alignment on our vision, our mission, and values, right? Mm-hmm. But we're not exact. And the reason we're not exact is because we are two different humans.
Exactly.
And so if we were far apart, I wouldn't even be here, right? I wouldn't even be on staff. I would have left a long time ago. But we're not. I actually love what we're doing. I love the way we're going right now. But it's still a little off. Yeah. But like two bullets shot out of a gun, two bullets shot out of two different guns that are just slightly off, that little millimeter over the course of 10 feet is going to be a couple inches. Over the course of 100 feet, it's going to be a couple meters. And over the course of a couple miles, it's going to be miles apart. And so what I'm telling my board is I'm saying, listen, as leaders, we don't live in inches away. We live as leaders, our horizon line is years. It's vision. It's long-term horizon. Yeah. So what I needed the board to understand is that you're going to hear things from me in front of you that feel like miles apart from where we are. And you're thinking, well, did we hire the right guy? I thought we were hiring someone to keep things going and to take us where we're at and just lead us to the next level. And the answer is kind of a yes and no. Yeah, you did. Because right now, yes, I don't want to change ever. I don't want to delete our mission statement. If I wanted to do that, I wouldn't be here, right?
Exactly.
I would not be here doing this vision if that was the case. But because I'm just a different human, I am literally Sam. I'm just a different person. I'm going to be different. And it's not so much necessarily in the vision, but it's how we're going to get there. Yeah. Because how I lead, how I talk, how I communicate, how I do things, what I prioritize and value. The mission, I'm telling people, is the same. Connecting people with God and one another is our mission and vision. How we're going to go about doing that is going to be different because I'm a different leader with a different way God's wired me. And I got to be true to God by honoring those differences. And so like a bullet shot out of a gun, you're not going to feel that tomorrow. No. You're not going to feel that even maybe a year from now. But when you come in my office in 5 years and go, hey, whoa, what are you doing here? I thought you were connecting people with God and one another. And it's like, whoa, yeah, I am. But now that gap is getting wider. Yep. You're going to start to feel that differently. And then you talk about 20 years. So when we get in front of leadership, people that are thinking like board, you're thinking 20 years out, they need to make peace with that. They need to go, okay, listen, Sam's going to come in the room. He's going to talk about an idea that seems like nothing of who we are. But in the same way that this church was nothing like how it is when Mike started 19 years ago, if Sam's living in the 19 years out horizon, guess what? That contrast should be there. And should healthy, you should feel that. Yep. Now, you need to assume that Sam knows enough about change management, that he's got diplomacy, that he's not an idiot, he's not a bull in the china shop, he's not going to derail everything to get to that 19-year mark, and it's going to take time. Yeah. But that's what I describe as the tension and the difference. I don't know. That's
fantastic. So a couple of thoughts off of that is it's interesting how like a DNA can be the same, but you can highlight different parts. Yeah. And like even like with a budget, right? Like it's the same thing. Oh, we're gonna
your kids. They look like you, but they're also different personalities.
Exactly. And so I think it's super healthy to think about it in those terms. But then I also want to challenge people that are listening. I don't want it to change. Yeah. And the reality is, there's always change. The change would happen for the next 20 years anyways, because even if your dad were leaving for another 20 years, it would still not stay the same. Yes. It would change in some different ways. Yes. And so I think it's powerful to realize that God puts different leaders in different places at different times. And you have to trust that those things are going to lead you in a unique and powerful way.
I have to shepherd and pastor. Yeah. And that means that people are going to go through the grief cycle of this. Mm-hmm. They are going to mourn the loss. He's not dying, but of Mike, right? Mm-hmm. That he's transitioning. Think about this. Mike has married and buried family of theirs, probably, right? Yep. And you're now, Sam, their pastor. And what do good pastors do when their congregation grieves? They don't invalidate it. They validate it. They walk alongside them. They grieve with them. Yeah. So I'm recognizing there'll be a period of time in my leadership where I will have to pastor and shepherd and walk alongside the grief cycle, which is shock, denial, everything's gonna be fine, Pastor, goodbye. And then they wake up and they're like, why am I angry? It's like you're going through the grief cycle. That's the next one. Shock, denial, anger, right? And then there's grief, right? There's sadness. They get stuck in one of these cycles. They might go through one of them a whole cycle in a day, in one meeting. And we are gonna have to shepherd people through those grief cycles and give them permission to grieve.
Yeah.
Encourage them to do it. Encourage them to move through that grief cycle, and then and walk alongside them. That's a part of our transition plan. We have to factor that in, and we need to let people know that's what we're here for, and that's not you're not a second-class Christian. You're not on board with the future. You're not on board with change. We're gonna get the symptom of that through the I'm not okay with change. I don't like this. They're gonna come at you. They're gonna come at me. But really, it might not be that they're not okay with change. Everybody loves change. When you get a promotion and a new $100,000 a year, guess what? You love change. Okay, so not all change is hated, but that manifest of anger or grief might actually be them grieving something else.
That's really true.
That's
something's wrong, and I'm going to direct it at the most
obvious
thing.
Exactly. Yeah. That was there was an article, I think, about that in some blog I read about COVID. People are going to be all upset at their pastors, but it's not their pastors that they're mad at. They just don't know that. Yeah. Their family, their kids are at home. They're doing homeschooling again. They're grieving the loss of society the way it was and all that. I mean, it's just so we got to have the humility to go through that with them.
Yeah.
The big one is usually worship and expression. I've long tried to tell people there's not very few amount of people that are upset with the change in the way you express your liturgy. Very few of them are just selfishly wanting their own style of music or whatever. Yeah. Very often it's that God has given them a culture and a language. You can't choose the era that you're born in, and the era you're born in gives you a culture and a language. Yeah. And so they can't choose that. They can't choose they were born in the 50s. They can't choose when they were born in the 60s. They can't even choose what church their parents dragged them to as a kid and what style of music that was. They can't choose those things. So God did that. God gave them an expression. And in the same way, I won't parachute into Africa and tell them to put all their drums away and here's an electric guitar and worship like this. I'm not going to do that to my other cultures of generations. I got to find a way to validate their expression, give them space for it and margin for it, because that's how they connect with God. That's what He gave them to do. Yeah. But we also have to as the book of Judges teaches us, prioritize passing our faith on to the next generation and listening to their expression and their culture, and like good missionaries, get incarnationally into that in ministry. Yeah. So that's for you non-Christians out there, that was a very deep dive into liturgy and change in that way. But so for liturgy, the services, the services, the pieces of the service, absolutely. That's a big contention change point in a lot lot of transitions like this.
Is. Yeah, right? Absolutely. Which just
hopefully your worship pastor is listening to this. At some point.
It's all going to be good. I have one more question for you. And if you want, you can drink from the single bottle of water.
There's only one left. If you could tithe more at Ripon Community, look at this. This is the last can of Who Hash.
Not true. There's more.
The last bottle of water.
The last question is this. You are on a stage and you speak to thousands of people. Yeah. And once in a while, they hang on your every word. Yeah. Maybe not all the time, right?
Yeah.
That kind of situation and that leadership can easily go to somebody's head.
Oh, yeah.
What are you doing to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, that's a really good. There's a lot of little things, medium and large things. Some of the little things are I've tried to. It's just hard, and not every pastor can do this because their voice. When you preach a lot of services, your voice is, it's important. It's a tool, and you're trying to be a good steward of it. You don't have an infinite amount there, but it's hard to sometimes sing at 3 services and teach. So some pastors need that green room to collect themselves. But one of the little things I do to preach this to myself and our congregation is I try to sit several rows back in the service and just random parts of when it's time for me to preach, I'll just weave my way around. Excuse me, gotta get to the and just walk up. And what I'm trying to do there, Thomas Long talks a little bit about this in one of his books on preaching, but you're showing people and you're reminding yourself, I am one of many. We need everybody in that room to pull this off. It's the workers are few. That's the problem. It's not that the harvest isn't. There's so much brokenness. There's so much pain. This world needs an abundance of grace and love, and it just needs people to share that in the ways that God's wired them. And I'm just one. I'm just one of the ways. So I'm coming from us. This is all of us together are part of this moment. I'm coming from us. And that preaches to me, and I think it's trying to preach that message to our congregation. It's not for show. It's not a gimmicky thing. It is to preach and remind us that we need each other in equal measure. And I just do one thing that just happens to be this thing, but you do your thing, and we need you to do it, and we're all in this together. So that's one way I do that. And that helps deal with that. I also I have a weekly. We shoot for weekly with our schedule. It doesn't always end up that way, but it is enough to be consistent. At least weekly, every other week, where I have somebody in my life that I need to. We meet simply really to share how we're doing and open up the ugly stuff, so that I need people around me who know me. I just actually talked about this on Sunday. There's a difference between character and reputation. Reputation is who people think you are. Character is who you really are. And if the gap between those things widens, not only is we have a responsibility to deal with that, because there's people that follow us and that we are influencing. And that's why James in the Bible says, not many of you should do this teaching thing. Don't do it. Yeah. The responsibility is higher. There's different stakes. Not many of you should do it. Paul talks about it, and the Bible talks about it. It's a noble pursuit, but not many of you should do it. It's just, it's going to, standards higher. You're responsible then for those people. And it's not that the blood's all in your hands, but there seems to be something, if you mess this up. So, but at the same time, it hollows you out. When those things happen, you're filleted from the inside out, right? You don't even know who you are. And I used to listen to people talk about hypocrites with disdain, but after having lived and been that and battled that, where I care so much about keeping that reputation. Like you said, the more people give it to you and have it, the more you want to keep it. When no one knows you, you don't care. You don't have a reputation.
Definitely.
But when you have one, you can worship at that, and you can do whatever you need to do to keep that, even if it means allowing your character to erode. So having people in my life that I give access to the character, who I really am, not who people know me to be, but who I really am, is a challenge, but it's something that I got to do. Because if the gap is widening between those two things, if I'm not killing that gap, it's going to kill me. And when I look at hypocrites, I don't look at them with disdain. I actually, when I see them like in the community doing something, and I know, at church they're putting on the mask, I'll be honest with you, my heart just breaks. It's not look at that hypocrite. What a frustrating. It's just that person is hollow. They are probably in such a lonely place. And here's why it's lonely. People will affirm and applaud and give affection to that version of you, right? The reputation.
Very much so.
But you can't receive that love, and you need to be loved. You deserve to be loved. Meaning not you deserve. People are commanded to love you, right? God commands us to love our neighbor, which means I am commanded to love you, Sam, but the real you, not the version of you. I'm not commanded to love the version of you. That's hero worship. I'm commanded to love you. And when you're not getting that, because it's all going to the version of you, the reputation, you know that mentally, no matter how good it might feel in the moment to get those likes and to get that affirmation, in the dark moments and in the quiet stillness of your own soul at night as you fall asleep, you're unloved. You're not getting the love that your version of you is getting the love, and you begin to hate that version of you. You begin to hate that reputation. You begin to hate things that stoke that thing. You actually become resentful. So what a mixed bag, right? You have emptiness, you have a lack of affection that you need and that you're not getting, and now you have a resentment almost to yourself. This is why people end up hurting themselves and hating themselves, because they just hate the version out there that people are applauding and love. It is such a complicated but painful story for, I think, anybody that has felt it, that when I see a hypocrite on the street, I just go, man, you need to know I love you. I don't care about what your title is. I don't care about what people think you are. I don't care about what you're trying to prop up at church. I just love you. Mm-hmm.
That's really, really good. I really appreciate both of those things. I mean, the first thing is just being with people. And go to Rich Flotis, the guy who just spoke at a conference recently. And he basically said, like, don't shy away from being with people. If you're starting to shy away from being with people, you're very suddenly elevating yourself, and that's not a good thing. And on the other hand, just making sure that gap doesn't open up is really, really powerful between your reputation and your character, who you actually are. Because as long as you can create a show and you can hold it together for a long time, but eventually it cracks, and it's not a good thing.
What do you do? How do you?
It's a really great question. So a couple things. I mean, for me, my wife is a fantastic help in this. There's nobody who doesn't cut me down, and I can't hide. It's definitely there, and that's the thing for me. She's incredible in that way, and I've grown incredibly grateful to her for that. Like, if I kind of have a show thing going on, she cuts it down really quick. But in addition to that, I need quiet. I need time by myself. As soon as I'm like feeding off the time with other people to kind of energize myself, as soon as I do that, and I know that I've got to go off and be by myself. And for me, those quiet moments, I can't hide from myself. And it's actually what Meg will tell me, my wife. She'll be like, hey, you need to go and be by yourself for a while and figure it out. And for that's been the biggest thing. And I have other people in the congregation and staff that are friends and that sort of a thing. Mike, actually, especially, we talk pretty openly about all the things.
People like you. Sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, but the quiet thing for me is a really thing. Going off and be alone. When I'm with other people, I'm always thinking about what they think. But when I'm by myself and just me and God, it's always really obvious what's going on.
This is true of everybody, but particularly leaders who have a platform, whether it's speaking or in leadership, whatever they do. You'll have a reputation in at least your work or whatever you lead, maybe even in the community, maybe even on a digital or national level. But I've heard it said that it's healthy to make it your goal then, if that's the case for your life, that the people who know you the best and respect you and admire you the most. And that's because that's hard to do when you've got this big ministry or this big influence in your company or business or whatever. And then you come home and the people resent you. The people there don't respect you nearly as much as the fans do. So one way to tackle this would be to say, what do I got to do in my life? What do I got to organize or rework or go to counseling for? What do I got to do to get my character right and to deal with this, so that in one way the outcome, the measure of success that this is happening is that the people who know me the best, the people who know my good, bad, and ugly, they actually admire me the most over those other people. So that's it. That's one way to kind of ask yourself these hard questions and get some measurements of success out there.
Awesome. Hey, we're out of time now, but we'll have to do this again sometime. But we
got to find out what you wanted me to answer with the comedy question.
We'll get there.
Well, that's a good cliffhanger for part 2.
This is awesome. I so appreciate you taking the time to come out to Ripon and talk. So much in this conversation. I'm so excited for people to hear.
We probably should tell people that anything good that I shared with them today, I absolutely 100% stole from your future lead pastor.
This is not true.
So we probably need to tell him, he's denying it because he wants the podcast to go well and for people to see it. But the reality is Sam is the secret sauce behind all my brilliance.
Not the case. But anyways, Brian, thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And for everyone who's listening, thanks again for listening in, and we'll see you again next week. Awesome.
Cool. That was fun.
Thank you.